As promised, a few more personal thoughts on the Ingram-Moore story reported by The Sun, and one or two bits that I left out. Straight to it, the bit that I left out was that The Sun reported that Colin Ingram-Moore, to quote The Sun, even bought back a company vehicle, 5 years old, Vauxhall Vivaro, for £2,250, which costs £33,000 brand new. Now, I was able to find the document on Companies House from the liquidators where they wrote up the reports of the sale of assets and so on. Under vehicles, it says the company's motor vehicle was a Vauxhall Vivaro van, which was 5 years old and had been used extensively. Following my appointment, the receiver goes on, I received an offer to purchase this vehicle from Mr. Ingram-Moore, a director of the company. The offer was in the sum of £2,250 plus VAT. I received no other offer for the vehicle, and following advice from my agents, who advised that the offer was at market value, Mr. Ingram-Moore's offer was accepted. The purchaser, Mr. Ingram-Moore, took his own advice in the matter, and I received £2,250 in October 2011. So on the face of it, it appears that whilst it might sound like a staggering difference between £2,250 and £33,000 new, it appears that this was the market value for the vehicle. Now, I don't know anything about that vehicle, obviously, but my very cursory search of Auto Trader suggests that an extensively used 5-year-old Vauxhall Vivaro van with, I put in 90,000 miles on the clock, appears to be valued at between £7,500 and £15,000. But it depends on the condition of the vehicle. Now, I am not a vehicle expert at all. I haven't bought or sold that many vehicles because I tend to keep my vehicles for a long period of time when I buy them. Usually in excess of 10 years per vehicle, but more on that in another video, perhaps on my money channel, which is Daniel Shensmith, linked in the description below. I'll talk about vehicles and my thoughts on them there. So there seems to be a bit of disparity in my view between what's written here about that being market value and my very cursory search for what would be market value for that sort of vehicle. But obviously, I didn't see the vehicle. I've no idea what state the vehicle was in. Maybe that was perfect market value for the vehicle, and that was a perfectly reasonable offer. And that was the offer that was accepted. Now, if that was wildly under what the vehicle was worth, doubtless I would expect the receivers would not have accepted that offer. But then obviously, coming back to the way that it's written up in The Sun, no criticism, Sun, obviously, you're there to write this up in the most attention-grabbing way, and I applaud you for that. But the way that it's written does seem to emphasize the contrast between £2,250 and £33,000 brand new. Certainly, it was not worth $33,000 when it was bought back from the company, from the receivers, by Mr. Ingram-Moore. So I thought, again, that was fair to point out. Now, this vehicle was in relation to the second company that was liquidated, BCKMS Limited. But as for a more general position of companies going into liquidation, I really don't like hearing about companies going bust, owing thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pounds to independent traders and companies, and essentially people that will have turned up and done work or supplied goods for the use of the company that's gone bust, because they are obviously left with a huge debt, a huge deficit to their company. Now, a lot of people will then argue, well, that's just a loss to the company that they can write off against tax. But of course, it doesn't really work like that. These companies invariably will have a big chunk out of their profits, and ultimately a significant amount of their time and trading has all been for nothing, and they have to work doubly hard to recover those gaps in their books. And ultimately, that has a knock-on effect on all of their other customers and everybody else as a whole. So everybody else will have to end up paying a higher price to cover these gaps, but also it may push many of these other companies into liquidation themselves, and they may have to cease trading because they may simply have no money with which to continue trading and, of course, have debts of their own. The only real way that companies can avoid this is to only pay for things up front that they intend to use, whether those are services or goods and products and so on. That is obviously not always possible, and there are various financing methods available for that, to which they should seek the assistance of banks and investments and invoice financing and so on. But again, more about that over on my money channel, Daniel Shensmith, linked in the description below. But ultimately, my personal thoughts on how this relates to the charity and fundraising activities, whilst the two are obviously completely separate and there's nothing inherent between the two distinct events to suggest any wrongdoing, it does suggest that those behind the companies had extensive experience in going through setting up and running companies, and of course when things go wrong. And with Colin being a chartered accountant himself, obviously would have had a good idea of everything that was going on. But notwithstanding, I think it would be a little bit hasty and perhaps a little bit unfair to link this news story with the charity fundraising, to use one to chalk the other up in a bad light. Ultimately, the Charity Commission is going to investigate the foundation and come to their own conclusions independently on that alone. And personally, while this current news story is not a great one, I personally don't think it should have too much of a bearing on what's going on now. That's just my personal thought, because obviously these things happened a long time ago, and sometimes things just don't work out. And as I said in my Black Belt Barrister video, there was obviously a professional insolvency practitioner instructed on each of these cases, and they would perform an independent and professional service in liquidating all of the assets and doing all of that fairly. So if you read this in the news and you're tempted to link the two together, I would just urge a little bit of pause for thought and caution, and treat each case on its own merit and independently. These are the bits that I think people may have their attention drawn to from those articles, but obviously this spills a little bit into personal opinion, which is why we're here on Black Belt Secrets. But I hope you found that interesting. Please do bop the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you very shortly, because I have something else to talk to you about that's completely separate, so it'll be in a different video. Bye for now.